Growing up, I learned a word from my mother's childhood home. That word was Dundee. It was the name of a street which by the time of my birth no longer existed. Dundee was a place of strange and varying legend. It was a place where a large pet rabbit stretched itself out in the sun by the open kitchen door, refusing to run off, in spite of my grandmother's encouragement. It was a place where privacy was totally lacking and where heads of children were counted to determine how much water to put in the soup. The neighborhood itself had been pre-urban planning, mix of old money, blue-collar tradesmen, working poor and simple grinding poverty. The old lived next to the young, not apart in planned communities. The races mixed and mingled. The churches and clubs here staggered their dances so the youth could be kept busy, going from Catholic hall to Anglican gym to Baptist meeting place and away from the grim truth of the street. Sometimes it even worked. One story among dozens that came down from Dundee was the story of Uncle Bob's bachelor party. Uncle Bob had gone to the war, and it had cost him. He survived rolling the tank he'd been driving, only to take a few steps away from the thing and step on a landmine. He come home to a loving fiancée, however, and as he learned to walk in his two new legs, they planned their wedding. As usual, at the time, neither bride or the groom's friends had a pot to pee in, as my grandmother would say. Dundee was offered as a place where the groom could bring his friends and celebrate his good fortune. The offer was accepted. On the appointed evening, the boys came in and my grandmother fed them. Talk flowed and laughter lit the room. My mother, 10 years old at the time and a bit of a nosy Parker, hung about, peeking into the living room to confirm that absolutely nothing of interest was happening. As the evening passed, one guest walked upstairs and was carried down. Another walked upstairs and was carried down. Wondering about this odd combination of answering to nature's call, my mother peeked into the living room again. It was a very interesting view, particularly for a 10-year-old. All of Bob's friends at the time were patients at the same veterans hospital, and each boy was missing something. Several, like Uncle Bob, were missing several somethings. The boys were happily toasting their hostess and playfully kidding their friend, arms left on tables and legs stacked beside chairs. They were home, surrounded by this house which, for the evening at least, could also be called home. That's all they needed. The next day, Bob would walk down the aisle with his bride, and the bachelor party would fade into rose-tinted memory. Dundee would stand a few more years, gather a few more stories. Stories about frost on the inside of windows and sleeping sideways on double beds because the cousins had come to stay, and that was the only way to make bedroom. But magical places are seldom left alone for long. Eventually, the urban planners moved in, and the entire neighborhood was torn down to make a planned community. Eventually, time would change the hard side of that life into innocent adventure. The old house, full of too many people, would simply become Dundee.